Hello and welcome along to the On the Whistle podcast. I'm your host, Zayn and Nabbi. Thank you for joining us around Africa's biggest football braai. It's absolutely cooking. From here in London to my co-host Alasdair Howorth in Edinburgh to the man who is an expert on all things African football, a dyed-in-wool Ghanaian fan, a friend of the show. Welcome, Gary L. Smith, who is in Accra. Some would say the home of football on the continent. Gary, welcome to the show. How are you doing?
Thank you for having me, Alasdair. Thank you for having me, Zayn.
Gary, always a pleasure to have you round our braai. There's so much to get into on the show. We're going to do something that's going to make Alistair very happy. We're going to talk about South African football in the form of the savior of Kenyan football, Benni McCarthy, taking over at the Harambee Stars. We're also going to have a big discussion around Aliou Cisse, the man who's being lined up to take over at Libya. We're also going to get into it around Ghana and how we will hopefully see a resurrection in the Black Stars football. We'll run you through the latest in the Premier Soccer League and the top of the table clash that's going to happen there this weekend. Not forgetting the CAF Congress that'll be taking place in Cairo. We'll give you the headlines out of that and how one African football legend might be making a return to football in a very, very big way. But the headline and the place for me to start is the news about Aliou Cisse, the great Senegal manager, the man who won the AFCON, the man who coached the team to an AFCON final. He qualified the Teranga Lions for 2 World Cups. He lost his role as the coach of Senegal last year, mainly because the sports ministry who pay his salary were at odds with the Senegalese Football Federation, who wanted him to continue, but the sports ministry felt like Cisse had not delivered on what he was meant to do with the golden generation of football. He now has been out of work. He's been linked with lots of teams, but Libya is the one where he looks to be landing. He's been spotted in Benghazi. Other high-profile coaches that were linked to the job include Pitso Mosimane, the South African coach who has done so successful at Al Ahly, and also somebody by the name of Carlos Queiroz, who's coached South Africa, has coached Egypt. He's been very successful at Iran, in the Middle East, and in the Asian Football Confederation. But now we have Cisse returning to football, and it's in Libya. Ali, let's start with you. What do you think of this move for Cisse? What do you think of this move into North Africa, into Libya? It's a sub-Saharan coach coming into that space, something we don't often see.
Yeah, I think there's some interesting elements to Zayn about it. Is like you say, I think it's first we need to celebrate the fact that a sub-Saharan Black African coach is getting a job in North Africa. We've seen those barriers start to break down over the last 5 or 6 years. Pitso Mosimane kind of being the chief kind of glass ceiling breaker, I guess. But we've seen others, Florent Ibenge, Rulani Mokoena, of course, now there, and it's nice to see someone from West Africa making that same trip. I think it's interesting because I think Aliou Cisse he lost his job in November, and he's actually been trying to get back into work since then. And in fact, there were even reports that he really wanted to get back into club football in England, which I think would have been really interesting. Obviously, he spent time here with Liverpool, with Birmingham, more of kind of closely associated with Birmingham City. I think it was a classy midfielder when he was there at the time, and particularly he was at Birmingham when there was the tragedy with the ferry off the coast of Gambia that a lot of his family was in. So and Bert I think he's very grateful for the way that the club and the fans treated him. Obviously, there's a famous story where he didn't tell anyone. He actually played in a Premier League game, before the kind of club found out what had happened, and then they let him kind of go home. And so I think there's some strong ties there. It's interesting that didn't pan out. Nothing there kind of panned out, I think, because obviously he is a very high profile now, having won the AFCON, but obviously we've had discussions recently about whether people in England really value the AFCON and value the
Don't get me started.
Exactly. We won't kind of get into that kind of worms just now. But I think it's interesting. Look, I think from the Libyan FA, I think Libya have gone through this kind of time of tumult. They were banned for a bit. They hadn't been playing regularly. They've kind of been in a really chaotic zone. And I think, kind of speaking with some Libyans, there's kind of conflicting feelings, because I think there's a sense of, what does Aliou Cisse bring? We don't know. He doesn't know Libyan football. He's not got pedigree outside of Senegal. Obviously, he was brilliant with Senegal, but he hasn't done it. And I think there's also a sense that maybe he's a bit of kind of like a crowd pleaser. They're getting in someone who's got, an AFCON on his CV, a big name. You mentioned some of the other guys who are kind of rumored to be in the running, kind of Pizzo and Carlos Queiroz. And I think he's also got some kind of big Libyan legends in his backroom staff as well. Tariq El Taib, Ahmed Al Masli, who've kind of joined in. And I think it's almost like a salve from the Libyan Football Federation towards the Libyan fans, saying, look, we can get these serious guys in. We can get this talent in. But, we can also keep, they're also bringing in Libyans who are very popular. So I think there's kind of a concern that it's not a super well thought through kind of decision from the Libyan FA. And from Cisse's perspective, it's interesting because you would think that he would be top of the list for, some of these bigger jobs in Africa, if he'd held out maybe Cote d'Ivoire or Mali, some of these West African kind of powerhouses. And in the same way that Eric Schell kind of went from Mali to Nigeria, I think there's more of an acceptance that kind of coaches can go between African nations in a way that they didn't previously. And so I think it's going to be really interesting. I think there's a lot to it. I think Libya are in a really interesting position as well in World Cup qualifying. I think they're probably in like the tightest group in terms of what World Cup qualifiers. They're in second behind Cameroon. Cameroon, we know, are not the team that they once were. And then you've also got Cape Verde and Angola, who in the last kind of 2, 3, 4 years have shown that they can really be competitive. So I think he's in a position where if he hits the ground running, which he won't take charge this next international window, which Libya plays Cameroon and Angola. So if they lose both of those, he's playing catch up. But I think it puts him in an interesting position kind of going forward. And it also means that he probably has the remit to be there until 2027. Libya won't be at the next AFCON later this year in 2025, but he's kind of probably has the remit to get to 2027 / have as good a go as possible at the 2026 World Cup. So I think there's an interesting appointment for sure. Is it the best appointment from the Libyan side and from Aliou Cisse's side? I think time will tell.
I mean, you look at this role, I got to ask you, Ali, what do you think his immediate goals are going to be?
Well, yeah, I mean, as I mentioned, it's the priority is it will be the AFCON 2027, right? The World Cup, Libya, obviously it would be a dream. It would be phenomenal if they qualified. And like I said, they're in a kind of competitive group. So I think there's a chance, but for me, it's all around the AFCON, which to me is kind of why it's a bit surprising that he went there, that he went, because essentially for him to get what he wants out of this job, he has to be there for the next kind of 18 months at least, or, more really getting into 2 years. And if he, more what I'm trying to say is, if he had waited until after this AFCON coming up in December, January, we would imagine that there would be movement from these other countries. If Tom Saintfiet doesn't kick on at Mali, he might lose his job. If Emers Faye kind of collapses at Cote d'Ivoire, he might lose his job. None of these jobs are secure. We know that's how it works in African football. Cameroon, another great example of kind of a revolving door policy. So I think that's where I'm a bit surprised, is it almost feels like he's waiting so long in a job that it's kind of hard for him to achieve much as the head coach of Libya in terms of what would success be, getting them to the AFCON, but that doesn't necessarily demonstrate that he can coach at the highest level of African football. So yeah, it's a bit of a catch-22. I think he's in a little kind of interesting spot, but we'll see, and time will tell whether it's a good decision or not on his and Libya's side.
Well, listen, if you're listening out there, please get in touch with the pod, OTW_podcast. Let us know what you think. Find us on X, find us on Facebook, find us on Twitter, which is X, I guess. Find us on Instagram. If you're looking on YouTube, just search for the On the Whistle podcast, and the same in Facebook. Gary, you've been listening in intensely and very patiently. But Aliou Cisse, what impact do you think he could have in Libyan football? Is there a lot of gas left in that tank for him to be successful? Talk to us a little about the style he pioneered at Senegal and what we could see and how that can translate when he takes up his role at Libya in the not too distant future.
Well, first of all, I think the appointment is quite uncanny because Aliou is somebody who is used to working with federations that do not fully trust him. And so if this, this kind of mistrust or the skepticism that Alasdair talks about meets him in Libya because he does not know anything outside of Senegal and all those other factors, he's not strange to them. Remember, he started coaching Senegal from the 2012 London Olympics, right? He earned his spot in 2015, but then again, people didn't feel that he was the one. The Senegal Football Federation president, Augustin Senghor, stuck with him, against all odds, and eventually it proved to be the right decision. But that was because he succeeded. One reason why, it wasn't the reason why he succeeded, but a key contributor to his success, guys, was that, he had the kids from London 2012, and so they trusted him and he grew with them. Is he going to see the same system in Libya? Is the question. Does he have what it takes to manage players he does not know from, from their infancy, if you like, from their youth days, to become fully ready national team players? All right, that's the unknown quantity. We know that he's good with managing egos. I mean, he has had bags of experience with this Senegal team, playing with some of the best in the world. In that time, he's coached Sadio Mane, who has been, up there in the Ballon d'Or conversation. Sadio Mane, who has become the African Footballer of the Year. Some of the defenders have been in either their country's league's team of the year, or they have been in the CAF team of the year. So these are players who have been quite good, and so he's used to managing egos. But Libyan football is a different kettle of fish from Senegalese football. Why? Because of the geopolitical situation. We all know just what it means, how far they've come, the lack of infrastructure, the lack of continuity. Senegal has had all these going for the last 10 years or more, where these structures have been in place to give him a team or teams that have been ready to go at all times. So for me, I think he probably took this because it's a good adventure, right? So that in his next appointment, he can't say, yeah, he could have waited out, like Alasdair said, to go into cushier jobs like your Cameroons, maybe if they would take him like your Gabons, and all these. But maybe he wanted a new adventure. He wanted something on his CV where he would say, I took them clearly from this point till this point. That's probably what he wants. And so that would be interesting. As for Libyan football, I think, despite the war, they are a bit like Sudan, right? They have a very interesting funding mechanism where even despite the war, like they still have a football team that's playing. And so, they have a ground
It's
that they are
phenomenal.
playing. Yeah, exactly. It's pretty interesting. So I was just hearing that Sudanese football and the national teams who have just beaten Ghana to the AFCON, for example, was funded fully by Morocco and Saudi Arabia, right? So that's what was happening. I mean, you would imagine that Libyan football would have similar. I don't know which country, but I've heard that, one of the Arab or Middle Eastern countries are supporting them in that.
You raise a very interesting point, Gary, if I can come in really quickly, because some of the media in Africa has been speculating on Cisse's salary, and they're now saying he's either second or third biggest earner in Africa, behind Hugo Bruce in South Africa and Walid Regragui at Morocco. And what is indicative, and we don't know, let us honestly say we don't know the salaries, but they're talking about something like, is it 40,000 euros a month that he'll earn in this role?
Yeah, whatever it is, it's going to be top. And I mean, how does a country that is, in this state able to afford salaries that, people like even Ghana, we cannot afford that at the moment. So what I'm hearing is about in the region of 60,000, about 60K, So, I mean, that's pretty interesting if that's the case. So anyway, yeah, I think it's an adventure for him. Whatever happens, he'll be able to put it on his CV that he was able to venture into a completely different culture, completely different climate, atmosphere, But Libyans are extremely passionate about their football as well, because it is an outlet for them in the midst of everything that's happening. So he's going to meet not too dissimilar case from his native Senegal, but a different kind of passion, not passion born out of we must win, but passion born out of just give us something to smile about. So yeah, I think it's. I mean, what is life if you can't explore, if you can't take a bit of risk, if you can't, venture into the unknown and try something new? What is life if you always want the ordinary? What is life if you always want the predictable? So I guess that's what he wants to do.
Yeah. Gary, to come in and ask you a question, I mean, would it be fair to say that Cisse has been the most iconic coach in recent history from sub-Saharan Africa? Two World Cups have been qualified. They made the knockout rounds in
Absolutely.
Qatar. They won the
Yeah.
AFCON, lost in another final. And for those out there who might not be familiar with Cisse's style, is he somebody who is a tactician in your mind, somebody who puts the arm around the shoulder and gets the players on side? What are his greatest attributes? Because he's someone that I've admired from the sidelines, seems like a thinker, and seemed like somebody who has the respect of the dressing room because of his own, achievements as a player with Senegal.
Exactly. And that's why if you are Libya, you would get him, not because of what he's done as a coach, but because of the reputation he built even as a player for club and country. National team, he was their captain. We saw how he conducted himself. If he walks into a dressing room, you better respect him because he commands it. He's been there, done that. You only have to go into your phone to Google Aliou Cisse to see that, all right, it's not time for playing. When he speaks, I have to listen. Is he a tactician? That's that's a big debate because um, people have said, can you hear me?
Mhm.
You keep going. We can hear you loud and clear, my brother.
Yeah. People have said that he he's not as good a tactician as needed. And it was one of the main things that was said against him at various periods in the 5 years before he was actually kicked out of the job. It was some of the things that were said that he's not that much of a tactician, and that when it comes to the crunch games, he's the kind of coach who can take you to quarterfinal and then he's stuck. That's what was said about him, which is why the fact that he won the AFCON in the way he did meant so
Mhm.
much because it was a personal validation. And if you listen to, I remember being at that AFCON and people, I remember interviewing El Hadj Diouf, and he's saying that the old players all rallied behind Cisse because people people simply doubted the guy and they knew he could do it. He just needed a bit more time than the normal, than the usual, you know.
Sure,
So
sure.
if that is the case, then I think Libya would have to be all patience with him because it's a new environment. He's not your Claude Leroy, he's not your seasoned African, he's not your Tom Saintfiet who's coached 3 or 4, African countries and can
Mhm.
draw on a well of experience. He's not your that guy. You have to give him time to know the players, to bond, to figure things out, figure the culture out. And I hope that they know that. So yes, in my mind, to be honest, I won't put him as a top tier tactician. No. I would say that he's a better man manager than he's a tactician, but he's not a bad tactician, mind.
Sure. No, that makes complete sense, Gary. And that I think serves as the perfect transition to what we have going on in Kenya. Trust there to be a South African, to be the savior for Kenyan football. I'm so proud. I'm so happy to see Benni McCarthy, our finest export into Europe. Oh, biased with that one, but our finest export into Europe won the Champions League. Great success at Porto. Benni McCarthy taking over at the Harambee Stars. Ali, let me start with you as a fan. I mean, let me sort of set the case right here. Benni McCarthy as a coach, wherever he's gone, has achieved some form of success. With Cape Town City, which was effectively an expansion club in South Africa, he coached them. They won trophies. He went to Amazulu in South Africa in the Premier Soccer League. They're known as an underachiever, a team that are normally mid-table, Durban-based. With him coming in mid-season, they finished second in the league. The second season didn't go so well, and that ended. But then he landed at Man United, worked under Eric Ten Hag as the forwards coach, and he was a part of Eric Ten Hag's team that won 2 trophies. So he won some silverware there. Of course, relieved of his position at the start of the season, and since then been looking for work. He's been linked to roles in the Premier Soccer League. He's been linked to roles in the MLS, but he's landed at Kenya. What do you think? Optimistic?
Well, Zayn, let me firstly say this as a diehard Blackburn Rovers fan my entire life. My first ever football kit that had a name on the back of it was I think was it 2005-06 red black calves kit. I think it was Bet24 sponsor with McCarthy on the back. So I'm buzzing, Zayn, because Benni McCarthy is one of my personal heroes as a Blackburn Rovers fan. I love him, and it's so exciting for me. From a Kenyan national perspective, I think it's interesting because what we've had happen in Kenya is we had these 2 years where the Kenyan Federation was banned by FIFA from all practices because of interference with the government, because the head of the federation was arrested for financial irregularities, to put it kindly. And so since then, we've then had elections that have just happened, and we've now got a new ExCo. So Hussein Mohammed is the president, with McDonald Mariga as his vice president, brother of Victor Wanyama, Inter Milan player, legend of Kenyan football. And I think this is kind of their big showing of we want to be taken seriously. We want to re-enter the conversation in terms of being a proper footballing nation. And I think it makes a lot of sense from their perspective, because hopefully if we get Nyayo and Kasarani stadiums up to scratch by 2027, Kenya will be one of the hosts of the 2027 AFCON, which is tremendously exciting for Kenya, and as well as for Uganda and Tanzania. So I think it kind of makes a lot of sense from the Kenyan side. And I think Benni McCarthy is probably, he's the most high profile coach I think we've had. Henri Michel used to play for France. I think coached us in 2012 very briefly. But I think in terms of kind of modern coaches, he's definitely the highest profile. Like you said, he's got a real track record. I think back that time at Amazulu, they did really well. I think even kind of, despite the struggles in the next season, he was doing quite well in kind of continental competition. Obviously, Man United has shown his kind of individual coaching prowess. I think Marcus Rashford kind of credited him a lot with his redevelopment as a striker, kind of when he kind of had a bit of an Indian summer, I guess, under Ten Hag after struggling for a couple of years. So I think there's a lot of potential there. And Kenya are kind of in an interesting point where, like I said, we've been banned from all footballing activity outside the country for a while. There's not been much development. There's not been much focus. We have a couple youngsters coming through that are quite exciting, but we've still got essentially the key of our team, which is Michael Olunga up top. Obviously fantastic player. In my opinion, one of the best strikers in Africa, and could have had a very successful career
Olunga
in Europe if
old.
things had gone differently.
Olunga is old.
Huh?
Olunga is old, man.
Yeah, he's old. He's coming to the end. But what I mean in
glad
terms
you
of
said
Olunga,
it, Gary,
let
because
me
I
tell
was
you,
thinking
Gary.
it, right?
But let me tell you about Olunga, right? His kind of what has made him brilliant as a striker has never been youthful traits, right? Yes, he's quite fast, but what's always made him brilliant is his skills as a target man. So I think give him a couple years, he still will be there in 2027. I'm sure he'll still be there up top.
We're going to park your loyalties to one side, and we're going to bring in the cold-minded, ruthless analysis from our African football expert, Mr. Gary L. Smith. Gary, what do you think Benni can achieve at Kenya, a nation that has high hopes? He is a young coach who's trying to achieve things. Is this going to work?
They have, and I think more than this. Libya competition, Kenya need to be extreme. It's not good, but because there's enough the kind of right certain level of professionalism, finesse, they simply cannot give it to him because they don't have it. They've not built it. Okay, so he literally has to. I saw the list of his assistants who he was bringing from South Africa, and my first reaction was, oh boy, they are going to have a good adventure, because whatever it is they are used to in South Africa that they get from with a snap of their fingers, they are not going to get in Kenya. They are not going to. So they have to wing it, and they are going to have a fantastic adventure. if they can just let their head down and enjoy the adventure together, fans, federation, because Kenya have clear. It says a lot. And did you watch the press conference of the unveiling? I mean, for countries like South Africa and your Nigeria and Ghana, it's basic unveiling for a coach. Like it's basic.
Yes.
But for Kenya, this was rolling out the red carpet for
so
the,
over the top.
like it was over the top. For Ghana, we do that all the time. South Africa, like this is something South Africa you can do in your sleep.
Come on, this is like a Champions League winner. South Africa's all-time scorer.
No, I'm
this is
saying,
an all-time African great.
yeah,
Roll it
that's
out.
something. I mean, the kind of unveiling they did is something. I don't want to even say pirates or stand downs. A club like Leopards, the kind of unveiling Leopard for their coach, and it was a big deal in Kenya, like deal because they had done it in a conference center, in a ballroom with LED lights. Because usually their unveilings are very, very basic, like run of the mill.
In
you
the
get
FKF
it?
offices,
So
yeah, it's not a good look.
I think they need to first temper their expectations and know that they don't have the requisite talent and infrastructure to give this guy the sort of lift they expect. And it must be communicated to the populace. What they would get is a lot of fun from this guy because he's going to choose players on merit, and we know Benny's football. He likes swashbuckling, defending when he likes to be pragmatic when he's due. So there's going to be a lot of sashaying of emotions. They have to be ready for it. I'm really thrilled. This is the kind of blockbuster appointment that is able to bring a country's football from the darkness into light. I think, and this is what I suspect, Benny will be the guy who will take them to a certain level, and they will need a certain caliber of coach to take them to the promised land, because he's not the guy to take them to whatever promised land they want. So, at the peak, he might take them to like some AFCON, be able to squeeze every drop of passion and talent out of the boys, get them to a certain AFCON, and then at the most, they are going to get out of the group and then crash out at the round of 16, but it will be a big deal for them. You know what I mean?
That'd be a huge deal.
Yeah.
And kind of what Gary is saying there is so right? Like from a Kenyan perspective, the issues are all elsewhere, right? You can have the best coach in the world, but the lack of infrastructure, the lack of investment over the last decade, the kind of rampant corruption, the fact that we're even relying on Tanzania for our own TV deals now with Azam coming in, like that is where the real challenge is. And Gary has said, we'll have a lot of fun with Benny. I think maybe, but also saying, Benny better than both of us. Benny does not suffer fools.
No.
He has incredible standards, and he is a kind of abrasive character. He is not scared to call people out. And so it's going to be interesting because and I think that's maybe even partially why Hussein Mohammed and McDonald Mariga have gone for someone like Benny, is they're desperate to push forward this kind of new image of Kenyan football, that we are serious, we are professional, we have integrity, we will kind of develop as a football nation. And I think from Benny's perspective, he's got a really nice run in towards the 2027 AFCON, because essentially the World Cup qualifiers are a bit of a write-off. We're in Cote d'Ivoire's group. We're never catching them. We've already drawn with them once, which is a brilliant result. But for us, it's kind of, can you get second, maybe get ahead of Gabon? That would be an amazing achievement. But it's really building up to that 2027 home AFCON. And so I think he's in a great place in terms of the run-in and in terms of his time to prep. But the huge question, is really off the pitch. And can the Kenyan Federation show that they're serious enough to actually, I guess, warrant having a coach of Benny's standard, and will he kind of suffer the fools if they don't? Will it become very abrasive? Will it kind of fall apart spectacularly? Because we know Benny's got that in his locker. We know he's an abrasive. We know he's a Cape Town boy. He's got it in him to kind of fight with people, to tell them when they're wrong. He's got a strong head.
There's a lot to digest there with Benny in Kenya. Gary, thank you for joining the show. We've loved chewing the fat on Aliou Cisse and Benni McCarthy and the new roles. We'll let you go, and Ali and I will continue the conversation as we have a few more points to run through. Thank you, Gary. We wish you well. Then you can do the sting, ding, 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 whatever, boom. All right, if you've listened and you have some thoughts on the previous block of the show, please reach out to us, X, Instagram, OTW_podcast, or leave a comment here in YouTube or Facebook or whatever platform you get this podcast and you get our video or you get our audio. We'd love to hear from you. Ali, just two more points to run over really quickly. I know we could do an entire pods in these, but we're just going to give people a quick overview. We know that the CAF Congress is going to take place in Egypt this week. There's a lot on the agenda, but something that I've been following is Samuel Eto'o and how the Court of Arbitration has allowed him, sort of upheld his appeal, where now he can run for a position on the ExCo. Do you want to just remind people why he was suspended and how that had to do with a betting company, but now he has a chance of sitting on CAF's highest decision-making body?
Yeah, Zayn. I mean, it's kind of a bit messy, but essentially, Samuel Eto'o, president of Cameroon FA, FACAFOOT, was suspended by CAF after kind of appeals from a lot of Cameroonian football stakeholders, including the Cameroonian football leagues, in which there were irregularities about his kind of relationship with the betting company, 1xBet, 10xBet, not quite sure how you say it. So they sponsor the Cameroonian football leagues. They also do partner with CAF as well. Interestingly enough, I believe they used to be sponsors of the Premier League, but the Premier League has actually banned them from being sponsors because of kind of questionable connections with the betting company with other companies, as well as kind of the opaque nature of the business. But Samuel Eto'o had done a series of adverts, I think, and had been sponsored by them, which is in violation of, I think, FIFA and CAF's rules around relationships by administrators with betting companies. He was also under investigation prior to that internally in Cameroon over allegations of match fixing in the Cameroonian league. Some people had accused him of match fixing in the Cameroon. Now he's been cleared of both of those. So initially, for the Cameroon side, he was cleared of that under a lack of evidence, essentially. So he was cleared of that, and he is now being cleared by CAS, the Court of Arbitration for Sport, which he had to take CAF to, who ruled that not that his relationship with his betting company wasn't irregular or anything like that, but that CAF actually didn't have jurisdiction over the case to kind of suspend him. And actually, it has to be CAF's independent ethics committee are the ones that should have suspended him, but actually it was CAF's internal discipline committee that did it. So there wasn't necessarily a comment on. Yeah, it's not exactly a comment on actually the relationship of Samuel Eto'o with his betting company, but more the kind of statutes. And look, Zayn, CAF aren't the first governing body to be caught up in that. We're currently in the Premier League is being kind of given the runaround by football club after football club, but it's a bad look for CAF. But interestingly, it might not be a bad look for CAF in a bit, because they're on the verge of the Congress where they'll be voting for the next ExCo, and Samuel Eto'o is considered to be one of the favorites to be on it. There are questions around his relationship with Patrice Motsepe, a sense of fear that, Samuel Eto'o is maybe gunning for the top job in the future, or gunning for kind of work with FIFA. Kind of, we're not entirely sure. Motsepe was initially thought to maybe not be running again after his first stint, but then declared that he would be. And Samuel Eto'o obviously would be a natural kind of competitor to him. He's arguably the most high-profile African footballer of all time, widely considered the best African footballer of all time. And while his track record with the Cameroonian FA has been less than perfect, I would say, there are certainly question marks over the way in which he's run the federation. Obviously, famously, with the time when they hired two coaches, and he had to back down and apologize to Mark Briss over that. But he has a track record of being an administrator now, and so he would represent a real potential threat to Patrice Motsepe. So it'll be very interesting. We'll see. We'll keep kind of abreast of what's happening, and kind of things could get interesting, messy.
Absolutely. And Alasdair, bringing it back to football and on the field, in the Premier Soccer League in South Africa, arguably the most high-profile league on the continent, we're going to see the Giants at the Sundowns up against the Soweto Giants, Orlando Pirates. This is 1 versus 2 in the PSL. Sundowns obviously quite far ahead and flying. But top of the table clash, what can we expect this weekend?
Oh, Zayn, man. We should be so excited for this game because it's two of the best teams on the continent going at it. This was meant to be the season the Pirates kind of rose from the dead. Jose Rivero, he's won so many
there when they
cups,
won the
won
MTN8
back-to-back
Cup.
Nedbank Cups. Yeah, exactly. They did so well in the CAF Champions League, topping the group with Al Ahly, like phenomenal work. But they've just since then they've really slipped up. They've kind of not kept up the pace with Sundowns, and they've dropped, and they're now 18 points behind Sundowns. Now, bear in mind, Pirates have 4 games in hand. So, Zayn, there is a very, very
If they
small
start
chance.
rolling.
Very, exactly. If Pirates win in that game, and then they win, and they win their 4 games at hand, and Sundowns drop points, then they can catch it. Now, look, Sundowns haven't been perfect, and this was why Pirates was seen as kind of, this is the year that you can get at them, because Rulani Mokwena has left. And let's be frank, Rulani Mokwena's standard, whether in the Nedbank Cup or the Champions League, can be questioned. In the PSL, he has been the best coach that the PSL has ever seen in terms of the points returns, in terms of the dominance, everything else that comes with it. Will he be considered the best PSL coach of all time? Who knows? There's been a lot of great ones. We had Gavin Hunt on a couple of weeks, another legend of the PSL, who obviously did a lot with very few resources. But Miguel Cardozo came in. He had a slow start, clearly wasn't up at the kind of same pace, particularly attacking football-wise. He's done really well in the Champions League, though. But it's kind of over this middle stretch between the Champions League group stage and knockout rounds where Sundowns have really pulled away from Pirates, and Pirates have kind of really slipped up with some really silly kind of losses. I'm thinking of the loss against Marumo Gallants a couple of weeks ago. They only just got who they will be playing in the Nedbank Cup semi-final after beating Baraka in the quarterfinals. Obviously, Pirates Sundowns thrashed them just a few weeks ago as well, 4-1 in the first kind of game between the two. Obviously, they will watch it. We'll be excited for it. We'll review it. But it's a tall order. And again, Pirates, but what you have to say is Pirates have it in them to beat Sundowns. They've got these talented players, Nkota, Dlamini, Maswangani, Mofokeng, Dion Hoto, and Bata. These are really talented players. They haven't got the consistency in the league, but they've shown, Jose Rivero has shown time and time again that one-off games, knockout football, that's his bread and butter. So, I'm grasping at straws here, Zayn, but Pirates to win. They win their 4 games at hand. Suddenly there's pressure on Sundowns. And maybe the PSL title run-in will be interesting again. But I think sadly not. But what I will say, Zayn, is Pirates, since the beginning of the season, even before the Champions League, were my dark horses to win the Champions League. And I can easily see that happening. I can see Pirates getting to a final of the Champions League. Winning it is a stretch. It's because you're coming up against real big teams. But I could easily see them finishing 20 or 30 points behind Sundowns and getting to a CAF Champions League semi-final or final because of that kind of capacity in the cup game. But I'll leave it there. We've gone on for too long. I'm excited for the weekend, but it's a shame. It should be a title-deciding game, and it's not.
Ali, thank you for your analysis. It's been super fun hosting the show with you. And for those of you who have listened, please please subscribe. It helps people find the show. We wish you well. We hope you are enjoying sun, heat, everything that Courtney Freeze does not enjoy. He's not on the pod today. Thank you for joining us on Africa's biggest football ride. Salagashne.